And then number 3 is the old adopting the resolution still about COVID-19. And I guess do we vote on that? I always screw that one up. Am I supposed to make a motion that we adopt a resolution and then someone seconds it?
That's been the
standard, right?
Standard. However, I will just mention moving forward, we're looking at further updates to the agenda, and I think we're going to start having a consent agenda where some of these things that are a little more ministerial but need a vote would be put on that, and it could just be done in one fell swoop.
Okay. All right, well, in the meantime, I'll make a motion that we adopt a resolution that as a result of the continuing COVID-19 pandemic state of emergency, meeting in person would present imminent risks to the health and safety of attendees, and therefore we will meet virtually.
I'll second that.
All right. And then we have the consideration of minutes. Agenda item 4, meeting minutes for June 13th, 2022 and September 12th, 2022. Did anyone have a chance to review those and note mistakes?
Mistakes were few and far in between. They were mostly just typographical things like commas. So minutes were good. I would move to
We're good.
I would move to accept the minutes as written.
Anyone else? I trust Fred on this one, but
Sure, I'll second it.
Well, we can still have discussion. We don't have to. If people have other comments, they can get those in, and we can amend it.
well, we have a motion and a second, and I don't hear any dissent from that, so I'm happy to.
I abstain.
Should we take a roll call vote?
We should take a roll call vote.
Yes.
Item number 5.
For the meeting minutes, if we could take a roll call vote
Number 4.
on number 4, the
Oh,
meeting
okay.
minutes. Yeah.
Right. All right, so let's take a roll call vote on the motion to accept the meeting minutes as written. And we'll start with Judith.
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
I'll vote yes. John Bars. Peter.
Abstain. I don't have them.
Okay. Ryan Casey.
Yes.
And Fred.
Aye.
I like that. Okay, the motion passes. The minutes have been approved. Okay, so we're looking at item number 5 as a tentative schedule for the next year.
Yeah, if I may, I don't know if the committee has done this in the past, but we always have at least the October meeting that needs to be rescheduled due to the Columbus Day holiday. And so just thought we put this out there at the beginning of the year or the end of this year to identify what those dates are. And as long as their committee is okay with those dates, that's what they will be. Should probably take, I would recommend a vote. It could just be probably a, all those in favor or not kind of thing versus a roll call. But just want to point out that the October meeting is recommended to be pushed to the following third Monday of the month for 2023.
Which is October 16th.
October 16th is the modified. It's the
Yeah,
date.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the previous week is Indigenous Peoples Day,
Correct.
and the Pumpkin Way Off. So you don't need a motion or anything from us as far as the calendar goes. It's just an FYI item.
Because we have the one date that gets rescheduled from the normal second Monday of the month, per the bylaws, technically, the chair at least needs to recognize or affirm that the meeting, the October meeting date is modified. So it would be ideal probably to either just take a quick, all those in favor, all those opposed type of vote, or if Chair Vars, you would like to just proclaim that this is the schedule for 2023, that would be sufficient. Either would be suffice. If you're
Great.
able to do
Well,
that.
yeah, I am really into proclamations. So no problem with that. No, let's do an up or down vote. Or all those in favor of the modified schedule with October 16th serving as our October date. Say aye.
Aye.
And anyone opposed? Then we'll consider the schedule as listed to be what will guide us for the coming year.
Thank you.
So where are we? Now we're in the oral communication period. All right. So this is a time when members of the public may address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. If your subject is not on the agenda, the chair will recognize you at this time. Wow. Do we have any hands? Actually,
I don't see any.
I'm actually
No.
having, oh, there we go. Okay, then we'll move on to item number 7, committee member updates and or questions to allow committee members to share news and or concerns for items not on the agenda.
I got one.
Great, Peter.
Last Monday, there was a mountain lion sighting in San Gregorio.
All right, is that near where you are or in right next to the post office there? Or?
It was close to the post office, yeah. It was walking right down the road.
Wow.
I think I was gonna go see Ryan.
I actually found half a deer carcass around that time on the farm.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
It was a big cat.
it was a big deer.
Yeah,
Doing
I
what
got
Lon-
one other too, to share. His last week was the continuing hours meeting, in the ag department did a really good job. And Corian, as usual, did a really good job as well.
Thank you. Peter?
She does a better job than that other slacker that was in there before her.
Oh, that other slacker did good too. Don't look for a attaboy. Anyways, they all do good, very good. Even the other guy that was there, he does good too, did good too.
No, you got to say that because you're a grower.
Yeah, girl. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I had something to share. It's been a few weeks now because the meeting happened right after our last one, but I did attend the inaugural meeting of the Farm Worker Commission. Not sure if I'm.
Oh, excellent.
And it was well attended, and there a number of people from the county were there, and there was a feeling of excitement in the air, I believe. People feeling enthusiastic about this being kind of a new commission that not many other counties in the state could claim to have something like it. It might perhaps one of a kind. The first meeting was pretty procedural. The main topic was deciding what the schedule was going to be going forward. I believe we settled on the Wednesday, the second Wednesday of every month. So it's going to be the same week as this one's occurring, which makes for kind of a heavy week, but then only 1 week a month where I'll be having to attend those meetings. But I think it'd be great for other members of the commission to come. We decided to do the meetings in Spanish, which also people from the county acted like that was a big deal, that there weren't many other county meetings that had chosen to have the main language be Spanish. But I think that they're going to be able to staff it with a translator, and excited to get that going. I don't know if that's about it.
John, thank you for attending that. I wanted to ask Summer, if people are interested in receiving notices about that meeting, can we sign up for those on the planning website?
That's a good question, Fred. That commission is not being managed or overseen by planning, so I do not know the answer to that, if there is a place where that can be accommodated. I will need to look into that with the boards and commissions office.
Okay,
get
yeah,
back to you.
thank you. John kind of presupposed my question on that, which was whether or not it had met yet, and if there was an update on it. So thank you, John. And I'd be interested in getting notifications for future meetings.
Yeah, and I know that we weren't going to do one in December, I'm pretty sure. So the first meeting, hopefully, because that would be this week. Yeah, I think the first the second meeting is going to be in January, and the first few meetings I think are going to be primarily occupied with trainings to try to bring members up to speed on kind of how county committees work. But hopefully there'll be some time for topics of interest to the members actually to come up as well.
John, it was your understanding that it'll start in January?
That was my understanding, yeah.
Okay. There wasn't much information on the website. I did look it up, but there was a link to, they recorded the meeting through Facebook, and it was posted there.
Do you have to have a Facebook account to view it then?
I don't think so, because I don't have one.
Okay.
So, and I was able to look at it. I think it's through Facebook, if I remember correctly.
I think maybe my internet's slow. I missed whatever my
there is a website, it's somewhere in the county website for the Farm Worker Advisory Commission. And there was a link for the first meeting and they recorded it. And I believe it's through Facebook, but I don't think you need to have a Facebook account to view it if anyone's interested.
I'll look it up, San Mateo County
Mhm.
Farm Advisory Commission, and
Yeah, Farm
Probably
Worker
find it down
Advisory
there.
Commission. Yeah.
thanks, Corin.
Any other member updates or questions? Okay.
I'll just mention that it's looking likely that starting in March, I believe, county public meetings will be returning to in person. So I think it's maybe been mentioned that that is going to be coming up here in the near future. So just throwing that out there. Our department is still working on whether those would be resume at the Ted Adcock building, I think is where they were being held before in Half Moon Bay, or what facilities are available. And we'll keep the committee posted as developments occur on the logistics of that, but just a heads up. So that's coming in the somewhat near future.
Okay, great. It's item number 8 is the Community Development Director's Report.
Oh, yes. See. Yes, I'll just go over, so the projects that are listed were from the month of November, essentially, and they're listed in the director's report and staff contacts for any questions related to those cases that are listed. With regards to announcements, the next Ag Advisory meeting will be Monday, January 9th, 2023. There are the 3 vacancies on the Ag Advisory Committee that are open for recruitment, the 2 farmer grower positions and 1 agricultural business position. And those application deadlines are for Friday, December 30th of 2022, so a couple weeks. And there's a link on the in the director's report for where the application information for that is online. And then just a reminder, for anybody who would like to receive notifications of the Agricultural Advisory Committee meetings, agendas, where you can find the packets, there's a link provided in the director's report at the bottom under additional announcements, item 3, where you can that provide instruction on how to subscribe to email updates. That is subscribing to that is the way you would find out, you would receive agenda meeting notifications and links to where the any particular meeting packets are. That concludes the announcements on the director's report.
Okay, great. I was just reading through there, seeing how a couple of the projects that we've looked at are being approved. And that brings us to our regular agenda, which I guess this evening doesn't actually include us considering development issues that the county are facing. So we're gonna have an informational / training item. And we look forward to hearing from our own liaison, Summer Burleson, presenting about farm labor housing, guidelines, application process, and procedures.
Thanks. So I'm going to share my screen here. I put together a brief presentation on farm labor housing in the county primarily with regards to the planning permit requirements and process. And so let me share. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Okay. So this may go, a little beyond, as the Agricultural Advisory Committee, what, the committee's interest and kind of purview or duty is, but since it's a public meeting, I thought we'd just kind of go through all of the basics for you, as well as so you can kind of get a full picture of the farm labor housing permitting in the county that you're, a part of, as well as for any members of the public that might be tuning in. So bear with me. The county, does allow for the provision of farm labor housing units when there is a demonstrable need for such housing. Qualifications for farm labor housing are that a farm laborer, the housing is for farm laborers, and that is specifically defined as a person who derives more than 20 hours per week average employment from on or off-site agricultural operations within San Mateo County and earns at least half their income from agriculturally related work. And the farm labor housing units that are allowed, they are to be self-contained units with certain specific minimum facilities. The housing, excuse me, must be maintained to meet basic housing and health code requirements. And the housing may be temporary or permanent construction, but there is always a condition added onto any permit for farm labor housing for removal or reconversion of the units upon termination of the unit for farm labor housing use. And because the housing needs to meet basic state housing and health code requirements, recreational vehicles, RVs, and trailers may not be used for farm labor housing. The units require utility connections, so a domestic water source, a wastewater system, and the permit process does include review by applicable sewer and water or sewage and wastewater and water, reviewers, which is typically environmental health services. And the units should be no larger than the minimum needed to house workers and their dependents. So both workers, the units can cover, provide housing for farm laborers as well as their dependents. In terms of eligibility, there are farm labor housing is permittable in certain zoning districts within the county, not all. It is limited to the rural zoning districts within the county, and that includes the PAD, the Planned Agricultural District, the RMCZ, which is the Resource Management Coastal Zone District, and both of those zoning districts are in the coastside area. It's the rural coastside zoning, and also in the non-coastal area, the rural zoning designation that farm labor housing is allowed is in the RM, Resource Management District. The farm labor housing would require staff's review, planning staff's review of the parcel's legal status prior to or concurrently with an application for farm labor housing, as required with any development permits for a property. In terms of the required planning permits, so it depends on what zoning district you're in. So for farm labor housing units proposed in the PAD, Planned Agricultural District, Coastal Development District, you would need a PAD permit and a coastal development permit. In the RMCZ zoning district, you would need an RMCZ permit, as well as a use permit and a coastal development permit, a CDP. And the CDPs for both if you're within the PAD zoning district or the RMCZ zoning district, would be appealable to the California Coastal Commission, which means that the county processes the permits locally and renders a decision. And once our decision process has ended, we would pass the decision to the Coastal Commission, and they would run a 10-day appeal period on the county's decision before the discretionary entitlement permits are have a final determination. And outside of the coastal zone, in the RM zoning district, the permits that would be needed, the planning permits needed would be the RM permit and a use permit. And planning and building permit application fees are waived. That was an action taken by the Board of Supervisors, I believe back in the 1990s, to waive planning and building permit application fees on farm labor housing as a mechanism for trying to encourage and promote this sort of affordable housing option. Other required permits beyond the planning permits that would be needed, environmental health will require an employee housing permit and a fee. That fee is not waived. That is if the project involves 5 or more farm laborers. And a building permit is also required. The building permit process and application is independent or separate from the planning permit application, and goes through separate processing. It's reviewed by much of the same reviewers that would review the planning permit application, but it is a separate application that needs to be filed and a separate process that would ensue. And typically that would be done after an applicant has secured their planning permit approvals. And there is typically additional documentation and reports that are required for a building permit that are not required for the planning permits, simply because the planning and building are looking at projects under different lenses. So in the planning permit phase, it's more of a conceptual review to a certain extent. Applicants are not required to submit full construction documents. If they need any certain technical, structural engineering, depending on the type of construction or units that are proposed and so forth. So those aren't required at the planning permit stage, but at the building permit stage, through a building permit, the lens of review is a little different, and they're actually looking at how the units are constructed. And so it typically does require additional documents or reports to support that application. But as I mentioned, the building permit application fees are also waived for farm labor housing. In terms of planning application submittal requirements, we require application forms, some basic forms. We require property owner concurrence, proof of property ownership through a copy of a deed or a tax bill, well pump test and water quality results for a water system will serve letter. This is something that environmental health reviews under the planning permit application, as they are one of the reviewers for those types of projects. And then plans, of course. So a site plan of the property, a floor plan of the unit or units, elevations and cross sections of the units, possibly a survey, depending on where the proposed development is located relative to property lines, a utility plan, grading and drainage plan if necessary, depending on if any grading is required to support the project, and the drainage section does review for increasing impervious surface areas, an erosion control plan, and access plans. And with regards to the process for farm labor housing applications, the process essentially, you can request, an applicant can request a pre-application meeting, which is typically something done, the request is sent to this Board of Supervisors office for District 3. And the supervisor's office will coordinate with relevant agencies, which would include planning, environmental health, our building division, and any applicable agencies that would be reviewing an application. They will request their attendance. You would meet on site with representatives, and you can walk through, the proposal kind of in the field prior to putting your full plans together for a planning application. And that pre-application is intended to help applicants kind of at the initial stages of thinking about doing farm labor housing on property, where without too much of a economic investment in putting plans together and so forth, can get applicable representatives out to the site, get an idea of what an applicant may be thinking of proposing, and be able to provide just some initial kind of on-site comments and feedback to help the applicant form an application. And then an applicant would, if they were going to pursue application, either with or without that pre-application meeting, because that is optional, they would go ahead and submit the planning permit applications. And that application process for planning takes approximately 6 to 8 months to go through. It does include the recommendation from this committee, as well as a decision either by the Planning Commission or the zoning hearing officer at a public meeting. If the project is in the PAD zoning district and requires a PAD permit, the decision maker is the Planning Commission. And if the project is in the RMCZ or RM permit or RM district, sorry, it would require a decision by the zoning hearing officer. So it's dependent on the zoning district and what planning permits you would need based on that zoning district. And then, as I mentioned before, the separate building permit application, which goes through the building division. Planning is a part of that, and planning would be reviewing to ensure that it conforms with any conditions of approval from the planning permit application, and is what was approved in the planning application. And that building permit application process is approximately 4 to 6 months. And the permits are good. Well, for permits for 4 or fewer laborers, the planning application or the planning permits would be good for 3 to 5 years. We typically, I think, would default to 5 years, but we certainly take any recommendations from the Agricultural Advisory Committee on what, if the committee has any particular request for a permit duration before the permit would need to be renewed. And permits for 5 or more laborers is the planning permits are good for 10 years. And then applicants, there's always a condition where that applicants need to submit renewal 6 months prior to expiration. for the if they want to continue use for farm labor housing on the property. And this is just another kind of view of the particular steps for the planning permit process. So initial application is submitted by an applicant. It's reviewed by staff and other relevant agencies. Planning staff would conduct environmental review or determine the appropriate environmental review documents to prepare for the project. In many cases, this is in the form of an initial study and mitigated negative declaration. And then we would bring it to the Agricultural Advisory Committee to make a recommendation. And that's where this committee is involved. And then it would move on to the public hearing for before the decision maker, either the zoning hearing officer or the planning commission. And we carry forward, excuse me, planning staff carries forward the recommendation from the Agricultural Advisory Committee, including any permit duration recommendations or other conditions. And so there's a public notice that's provided prior to the zoning hearing officer or planning commission meeting to property owners within a 300-foot radius of the project site. And the public hearing occurs, a decision is rendered by the appropriate decision maker. And then there's an appeal period, as with any planning discretionary permit. There is a 10 business day appeal period following a decision on the permits. And as I mentioned, once that 10-day local appeal period ends, if there are no appeals filed, then we would pass the county's decision to the Coastal Commission, and they would run a subsequent 10 business day appeal period on the project, where either the Coastal Commission could appeal the project if they did not agree with the county's decision, or a member of the public can appeal to the Coastal Commission. And after that Coastal Commission appeal period ends, if no appeals are filed to the Coastal Commission, then the project has the final, we consider that the kind of final approval of the project. And I will just mention, for the Agricultural Advisory Committee, when we do bring any planning project, actually, but including farm labor housing projects to the Agricultural Advisory Committee, planning staff does do a 300-foot radius notification of the Agricultural Advisory Committee meeting. So we mimic the public noticing that we provide for the permit decision that is considered by either the zoning hearing officer or planning commission. That public noticing effort is mimicked for the Ag Advisory Committee meeting. And for this committee's consideration, when these projects are brought to the committee for recommendation, the two questions you'll see that are in the staff report that planning staff provides to the committee are, one, will the proposal for a new farm labor housing unit have any negative effect on surrounding agricultural uses? If so, can any conditions of approval be recommended to minimize any such impacts? So we're looking for the committee's recommendation, but also any feedback, any conditions of approval that should be considered and carried forward to the next, to the decision-making body. And two, what position does the Ag Advisory Committee recommend that the Planning Commission or zoning hearing officer take on the project? And I am not particularly knowledgeable of the county's farm labor housing loan program, only to say that the county does offer a loan program for farm labor housing specifically, and that is done through, that's managed through the county's Department of Housing. And the contact there is Anthony Parenti, and his contact information is posted here on the screen. So for loan application forms or any guidelines, people can certainly visit the Department of Housing's website for the Farm Labor Housing Loan Program, or contact Anthony at the Department of Housing for information or for any questions on that. And this is just to wrap up some contact information for relevant agencies within the county that deal with farm labor housing permitting. And that's the planning division, the building division, again, planning permits, building permits, separate processes, and environmental health services, who is looking and reviewing water service as well as sewage disposal for farm labor housing units to make sure it's adequate and meets county standards. And for the loan program, if there's any questions about qualifications or parameters of a loan or process, the Department of Housing is the contact for loan program questions. And we do also have some information on the planning website. This is the link on the right-hand side above the image here. There's the county's standards and policies that were adopted by the Planning Commission, application forms for the planning permits for farm labor housing, as well as this guideline that this image is showing, that really dives into and provides a lot of detail in terms of the specific steps, and is a really great guide for anybody that's looking to do farm labor housing. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm going to stop sharing just so I can see. But I'm available for any questions, comments, concerns.
Yeah, I got a quick question.
Sure.
If I may. John, can I speak?
Muted. Yes, of course, Peter.
Okay. Summer, I know it's not in our county, but I don't know if it was about 6 months or a year ago, we had a report in our Farm Bureau meeting that it was a county in California that opened up that for farm labor housing, they could have it with RVs. I know we don't have that here in our county. Do you see that coming any time soon or at all in our county?
I have not heard any discussions from the county's side on that, is all I could probably say. I know a lot happens above me, so, but I've certainly not heard any rumblings or discussions about opening that up for our county at this time.
Those might have been special conditions imposed in response to fire. For getting new structures, using, I know a lot of communities for even residential were allowing RVs for housing temporarily until they could rebuild their homes. And I don't know, there may have been something like that just was an allowance in response to fire.
No, it wasn't that way at all. They opened it up. I forget what county it was. I kind of remember, but they did open it up that they were allowing RV housing for RVs for farm labor housing. It wasn't our county, but it was a county in California, and I remember it was a little while back, and but it wasn't temporary. It was made. It was allowable.
Well, if you run across the county, it'd be interesting to see their program.
Fred, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Amber, or Summer, sorry. I noticed in the start of your presentation, it said that housing will be no bigger than the minimum necessary to accommodate the worker and or their dependents. And so it sounds like there's some kind of minimum specifications as to square feet per person. is there any minimum specifications for per occupant as far as square footage and that sort of thing?
For the planning application part of it, there isn't. We have the application forms that need to be completed includes, there's some general ones. There's one particular to farm labor housing, and it does ask the questions as to how many farm laborers will occupy, how many units, how many bedrooms, bathrooms per unit, and how many farm laborers and how many dependents of those farm laborers will occupy each of those units. So you need to kind of categorize and specify the use of each unit. And that's what we base that off of, that it's meeting the minimum in terms of how many workers and how many dependents will be residing in each unit. There are, of course, separate building code requirements for minimum square footage for occupancy, but that actually is not taken into account for this provision.
Yeah, just having habitable, facilities, really goes to that. And I don't think it's so much anymore, but holy cow, I used to see situations where there'd be farm workers stacked into a facility, just like cordwood practically. And so as I was wondering, it caught my eye that there was that the housing will be no bigger than the minimum necessary, right? And I was thinking on the other side, hell, we have regulations for farm animals as to how much square space a chicken has to have, right? But I'm hoping that there's something somewhere, for what's a minimum for a farm labor unit and their family.
There certainly is a minimum per building code.
Can I answer to that? John?
Sure,
Peter,
Peter.
can I speak?
Yeah.
Yes, there is a minimum. It's 50 square feet per person in the sleeping quarters. And the reason why I know is because when we have environmental health come to our farm labor camps annually, and it says inspection, it says what's for years Brian Friends, and then it's been some other people lately, and that's what no. And also the state came to our camp with the county, and the reason why Brian Friends picked our camp to show to the state because it was one of the best, and the state guy said that, Peter, it's 50 foot per person, but the first at the beginning, he says there's not the square footage, and then the 50 foot is the next, so you could actually get 2 people per 50 foot, and then 1 additional person per every 50 square feet. And so that's how the state guy explained it to me, as well as to the county person.
And I'm guessing they also have similar requirements as far as number of toilets and that sort of thing. So thank you, Peter. Yep.
Yes, and I know those rules and regulations as well.
Excellent.
What?
Who's I didn't recognize the voice. Who was speaking earlier about asking these questions?
I was Fred Crowder, I think.
Okay, all right.
I was going to ask a question. Peter, do you know the state agency that oversees the regulating farm labor housing?
No, they came, I says, when the county environmental health had their audit, it says they came with Brian Friends, and Brian called me and asked, I want to use yours, Peter, because it's one of the best.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess the wording that Fred was referring to at the beginning was that you don't want to have things get classified as farm labor housing if they're larger than would be so like if you were to have was that what the wording was suggesting? So like if you were trying to build a 6-bedroom house but you only have 2 dependents, the county would kind of ask questions and be like, so this is really farm labor housing, on the flip side of providing more for folks. Is that kind of the intention of the, because it doesn't seem like it's specific. It's not saying like, oh, these units cannot exceed 850 square feet. But obviously you don't want people getting, building 3,000 square foot homes, avoiding permitting fees, you know, when under the pretense that it's for farm labor housing. So
Right, that's correct,
I
Chair Mars.
speak
The-
to that, John. John is Peter again.
yeah,
Okay, we had a situation, I says, a few years back. I says that, because this is kind of new to me, I says, where a family applied for farm labor housing and put a double wide mobile home because they needed the space and all that there. So when it said minimum, when it says not bigger than what was needed, that kind of surprised me at the beginning as well, because, and it passed through our committee about 10 years ago, and were, must be about 1,800 square foot home, a family of 4.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, farm labor housing is really intended to be, it's really considered to be temporary housing. It doesn't consume, I didn't mention this in the presentation, but it does not consume density credits, which are applicable in the rural zoned districts of the county. So PAD zoning, RM and RMCZ zoning. Intensity limits are based on how many density credits a property has. And we do not consider farm labor housing to consume density credits. Our local coastal program that regulates coastal development permits that are required in a lot of the farm labor housing situations on the coast side also support that notion that farm labor housing is really intended to be more of a temporary need-driven type of residential unit that does not consume density credits. And so in terms of that provision related to minimum necessary, it from the planning permit standpoint, that was intended to be provide a little subjectiveness, because we do want to encourage farm labor housing as a means of providing affordable housing to farm workers and to be able to fulfill that need without putting a specific limitation on it in terms of, it can only be this size or this many bedrooms. If there actually is a need for, a unit that's, I don't know, 1,200 square feet and has 5 bedrooms in it, if there's a need for that to support farm laborers, then we want to be able to provide, a path for that to be permittable. Excuse me, but there certainly is minimum requirements, which I think is what Peter is mentioning with the 50 square feet per person. There certainly are minimum habitability requirements per building codes that get into, you minimally have to have so much square footage per occupant or so forth. And those have to be met, but there aren't any specific maximums. It's just, it needs to be proportional to what the need is.
I noticed that Carrie Burke has her hand up. Carrie, did you want to make a comment?
Oh, I think I need to, let me unmute. Okay.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Summer, for your comprehensive presentation. And I think this is so useful to have more of this workshop type of information. I actually have had the privilege of working on farm labor housing my entire career. So I've also been in that situation years ago of making an inspection and being a little bit surprised and going into a room and just seeing mattresses actually leaning up against the walls because it was wall-to-wall people at nighttime when they came in. So, I mean, we've come a long way since that time when, I had seen that situation. And I know that the county has put a lot of resources into making this as easy as possible for folks. And I found Summer's presentation to be really great and up to date. The Farm Labor Housing Guideline book that is highlighted at the end of the presentation, though, was just completed in September of 2020. And it's really not, it's actually, it's out of date because there, we talk about, 5 sets of hard copies, which we don't require anymore. Everything's done electronically. And the timing, I think of that Summer reflected was much more in keeping, especially with the PAD. It's always going to take longer because the PAD farm labor housing applications need to come before the Agriculture Advisory Committee, which takes time to get on the agenda and have the staff report done for that. Of course, it could go a little faster in the resource management zone. And in the guidelines, they had the building permit at that time being 2 to 3 months. That's just never going to happen because fire and environmental health, those technical reviews, they always take a little longer. So Summer's information is much more up to date. And then just also on their sample site plan, they actually want, the dimensions of your leach, your septic fields and your setbacks and your well setbacks. So I know that it's more just like you said, it's a guidebook, but that's what always takes a little longer. It's really the devil's in the details of doing these applications. And as much as the county wants to promote it, when you're physically adding this extra density to a site, it takes some doing to ensure that all the requirements are met. And so even if there's programs out there to promote it, you still have to, meet these guidelines. And, it's, but I'm glad to see that, some more farm labor housing is being created out there, and, wish people luck in that endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred?
Yeah, am I muted? No, I'm not. Yeah, I just threw my hand up. I wanted to follow up on what Carrie said because farm labor housing is so important for San Mateo County. I mean, I know all the farmers already know that, but there just is not available housing. And if you're going to have farm workers and farm laborers, you have to provide housing for them because there's no way you're going to be able to pay them enough or they're going to be able to earn enough to be able to afford a unit, to rent a studio or whatever in San Mateo County. I mean, just finding one is almost impossible, but finding one that's affordable for a farm worker is just not going to happen. And so the farm worker housing is so important with that respect, is that if we are going to have farm labor in San Mateo County, and we're already critically short on it, if we're going to continue to have farm labor, it's going to be critical to be able to provide housing for them. So Carrie kind of touched on that a little bit, and I just thought I'd throw that in there for an informational bit.
I don't see how to raise my hand on my screen, but I just wanted to, I went through this process a number of years ago, and I appreciate these procedures just being clarified here in this document. This would have been really helpful when I was doing it. So I hope that folks do in the future will appreciate that work. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I was going to follow up. I know Ryan, holy cow, when you went through it, yeah, that was quite an effort. Is this something that Audria, the Ag Ombudsman person, helps out with? Do you know, Summer? Or does anybody know?
I would imagine people probably do reach out to her early on to maybe help with like the pre-application process if someone is requesting a meeting or just trying to figure out how to get started for farm labor housing. I'm not aware that the Ag Ombudsman position is involved once a formal application comes in and it's going through the formal processes.
So they can help provide guidance, and then if you need somebody to really assist you, you could talk to Carrie or somebody like that, or just grind it out yourself.
Right.
Yeah, that would be something that would be great. We're trying to get farm labor housing built, and luckily we're trying to do it on land that we lease from Post, and they're willing to put some resources forward in helping us navigate that process. And I believe they were helpful to Ryan as well in the past. But waiving the fees is great, but it would be it would be good if I think that it could be helpful if there were more, maybe Anthony in his position there managing that loan program, whether he has adequate support to really help people navigate the process, because even though it's fees have been waived and so forth, my impression of it is that it's kind of a lot to get through as a farm operator to jump through the hoops.
Yeah, I would say it's impossible as a farmer to get through this. I had help from Post, and we had to hire somebody to hold our hand getting through all of these hurdles. And it was quite a process. So yeah, it would be great if there was some county support to get through it, so that a farmer wouldn't have to hire somebody or really struggle, because it really is a massive endeavor.
But great. I think Carrie's hand is still up, but it may not be because it may be just because you haven't taken it down.
I got a comment, John.
Yes, Peter.
Yeah, John, I says, you're lucky that where you're trying to put your farm labor housing up is not along the coast, because ours that was up since earlier in 1952, the owner, being Post, didn't want it to obstruct the ocean, so they tore it down, and it housed 25 employees.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a complicated history, I think, with some of what's gone on. I would hope that wouldn't happen nowadays, but yeah, there is that view shed value that maybe they were placing an emphasis on, rather than the importance of providing housing for folks. And that's unfortunate.
The houses was in the canyon, and you couldn't really see them that much.
Yeah.
That was their wording.
Well, I'm lost track of, I think we're back onto, unless there's continued discussion on this item or questions for Summer, maybe more appropriately, we could move on to our continued discussion of the ag tourism. Was that the next agenda item?
Yeah, that's the next item.
So committee review of AAC subcommittee meeting notes on agritourism guidelines. And now I think we'll feel the absence of Lauren here. She's been great at helping facilitate these conversations.
Tough without her. We might be better off waiting the next meeting with her.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she's moving, so we gotta be able to manage, I think. I believe we had sort of gotten through the consideration of tourism, and we were looking kind of more directly at the farm dinner thing.
If I may, I think that the length frequency of agritourism uses and then length frequency of agritourism, for agritourism as well as the farm dinners, length frequency of farm dinners were the two first items that the committee discussed, and I felt like at the last meeting, those two topics kind of got wrapped up, and I think Lauren was going to work on kind of summarizing kind of the conclusions from those discussion items. But of course, if the committee wants to revisit or has anything more, but I think what would happen is that once Lauren has an opportunity to summarize those, and I'll check in with her and see if she may need some assistance on that, then it would probably come back to the committee to take a look and make sure everything got captured. And then I don't know the next kind of topic that the committee wants to cover.
Yeah.
Would it be better if we wait to next meeting to when you capture, go over them the next meeting?
Yeah, I'm just kind of skimming through this last item. It seems like there's a lot of notes from previous meetings is kind of the bulk of it. And unless someone else has looked through it and has a sense for how to proceed, I'm trying to just find, is there like a third, we've talked about the farm dinners and we've talked about the ag tourism. Is there like a third discrete topic to which we could get some notes down? And I'm not necessarily seeing that. I do see you pick kind of coming up occasionally in the notes.
The other one was non-consecutive days.
Right. I think we've kind of captured our opinions on the non-consecutive day ideas around.
Yeah, there's I don't know, this might be a topic, farm tours and educational tours, just in terms of there's notes that the current ag tourism guidelines, it's a little gray with respect to those types of activities. They're subject to review and approval by the community development director. And if there's any
Well, we talked about that
comments
before, at farm tours,
specific.
if it's tours of a farm that doesn't have the bouncy house, it doesn't have the train ride or any of the other things, it's done by right, it's not part of agritourism if you don't have the agritourism stuff.
Yeah, and I think it maybe is the not regulations, but the guidelines when they were crafted maybe did not make that clear, I'm thinking. And maybe the committee wanted some more specificity.
It was clear to me, and I was on the subcommittee, because all the agritourism was based upon having the bouncy house, the hay ride, the train ride. If you didn't have any of this other stuff, you weren't doing agritourism. You were doing a farm tour, a U-pick, produce stand or whatever, and did not fall under the agritourism guidelines because you were not doing agritourism.
Mhm.
Simple, very simple. Agritourism guidelines were the guidelines that set place in effect that of what you could do that wasn't agriculture. The bouncy house, the hay ride, the train ride, and they had one other thing down there, I don't know if it was E or what, that was left open to something that was decided by the subcommittee. So if somebody would think out of the box other than what we listed, that they could do that was approved by the committee, that can be.
Mhm.
Like I say, those were the guidelines. If you grew your own produce and did a U-pick, you didn't have the train ride or any of that, you weren't doing agritourism. It's done by right. If you wanted to have a tour of your farm and you did tours, you walked around the farm and there's a guide explaining what was planted, what not, whatever, that's all done by right. If you wanted to do vegetables that you're selling on your place, that you grew yourself, all done by right. It's when you do the bouncy house, the yada yada, et cetera, that starts the agritourism.
So maybe it's that in the guidelines, the where it identifies the, petting zoo and the pony ride and bouncy houses. And one of the items is other recreational educational activities subject to review and approval of the community development director. Maybe is that sort of the category, Peter, you're mentioning that was put in to kind of capture anything that maybe wasn't specifically like explicitly listed here, but that maybe could come up in the future that we just couldn't, can't think of every scenario that's gonna.
Right. We talked about gondolas. We talked about a lot of things
Got
in
it.
that meeting over 10 years ago. That was the category. Yes, it talked about different things, and so that was the category that was put into. And I remember Tim Fox says, I don't care if you had a gondola going over your farm. But anyways, so those are the things that's that category that fell into, and so that would fall into the guidelines. And if somebody wanted to have, I don't know, different other things, I can't think of right now, but that's what it would fall into. But all the other things were by right if you didn't have the agritourism.
Right. Yeah, I do see in the notes from previous subcommittee discussions that there was mention of farm tours not being considered an agritourism thing. I wonder if there was a feeling from the committee that we'd like that to be more clearly stated so that there wouldn't be confusion. Not that you're confused about it, Peter, but maybe other growers might be. I see that Judy and Fred have their hands up. I have to
John, let me
I have to
add
plug my computer in.
Let me add one more thing real quick, John.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
You could, that's fine if you want to do that, John. It's just like I mentioned in the past, when I was in Pescadero 4-H Club, we used to go to get together at the flagpole, and we used to go to house, and we would go and see if there's a person that did gardening, the gardening project, and then we went to the next place, and that was on the schedule, and then we went to their place if they had lambs, their lamb project, their beef project, and we did that. There's no agritourism. That was all done by right, and I know that's just talking about a 4-H project, but this is the same thing as a commercial project if they wouldn't have tours of the farm, and it's just all done right. It's not doing the agritourism part of it at all. But anyways, I just wanted to throw in the 4-H part on up there. Thank you.
Great. Judy, we haven't heard from you yet this evening. I think Fred's hand was up earlier, but do you have a comment?
Fred's hand was definitely up before mine, so
Go ahead, Judy.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I was on the subcommittee most recently, and my memory was the sort of like as Peter is characterizing it, it's the stuff that is not related specifically to agriculture as an opportunity to participate, which might be the UPIC, an opportunity to learn about agriculture and how it's done, which, you know, if I think about it, what the Verde, the
Vita
permit-
Verde.
Yeah, Via Verde. Yeah. So that kind of an activity was considered more educational, extending out to the community to learn about agriculture and how it's done, and also what's going on in our county. So that even things like the farm tours, the dinners that would feature things grown on the farm stands, all of that basically supports a healthy agricultural community where the non-agricultural folks in the community get to learn about it and how it's done and participate in supporting it, which is quite different than bouncing around in some whatever that is more of a touristy kind of thing. And a lot of our conversations kept revolving around those kinds of distinctions and being able to support farms in alternative sources of income that also featured and focused on the work of agriculture.
Thanks, Judy.
Hey, John,
Yes.
I want to add one more thing. Yeah, but the subcommittee that I was talking about was 10 years ago is when a few of us were in the subcommittee from the Ag Advisory Committee that went to first develop the agriculture, tourism guidelines, and we met at the county office in San Mateo, and so this is what I'm referring to. And then, as well as Judith pointed out, our subcommittee that we had recently, about a couple years ago, that we went over as well. But if you wanted to put wording in there so maybe other people don't get confused, I don't have a problem with that. But I just want to really make clear that and we went over this with Tim Fox, County Council, that we all agreed on, that basically farm tours, UPIC, and all that's all done by right, has nothing to do with agritourism, the bounty house and stuff. That's where you get into agritourism guidelines, where you don't use the guidelines, you don't even, it has nothing to do with it. It's all done by right.
So that there is a category of activity that isn't directly the practice of agriculture, but is enough related to agriculture that we wouldn't require a permit for that. We don't even need to call it tourism. It's something else. Fred, you were going to say?
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute myself here. I remember what Peter's talking about as far as meeting years ago down at the county offices to discuss this. I'll tell you, for as long as I've been on this committee, this item has been on the agenda, and I still don't know why it's on the agenda. And is this at the request of the planning department? Is it because the regulations need to be reviewed and updated, or what's the origins of why we're doing this?
Well, I'm not sure that I can speak to that 100% accurately, but my understanding is that Audria maybe brought this up about a year, probably 2 years ago at this point. And she had been receiving, I believe had been receiving feedback from members of the agricultural community about people not understanding what was allowable and what wasn't allowable, and feeling as though they were unclear and therefore hesitant to be engaged in activities that were tangential to agriculture, maybe not directly growing something and then selling that thing that you grew, but something else, and not sure whether what they were going to do, we kind of have a very clearly established relationship around the Christmas trees and the pumpkins. And a lot of the old farmers know how that whole thing works with the 45-day permits. But I think she was getting feedback that there was a desire for kind of a renewal of the effort on the county's part to support agriculture in more creative ways. And I think that's how it got on the agenda. And then, we've been kind of talking about it ever since. And I think we did an example, Fred, of where maybe we are adding value is like the discussions that maybe happened. I mean, you missed a couple meetings, but I think you, so maybe maybe you missed the ones where we really got to the meat and potatoes. But we talked about how, like, oh well, instead of there just being 2 45-day windows, what if we had it open for 6 15-day windows, and so that people could build new agritourism onto their farms. There was like, oh well, I want to do a strawberry festival in June, I don't want to do a pumpkin festival, and trying to open it up a little bit. So I think there was some valuable discussions that were had, and hopefully those recommendations can be made to the county. But as far as changing, I think where we are at what we're discussing right now, I don't know that there is any need for us to change what is currently understood by the county, because I don't think anyone at the county is saying we can't have farm tours. I don't know if it's important for us to flesh out, the number of people that can participate in a farm tour. Is there some, are there instances in which the county gets nervous about activities that are going on the farm when it is more of these educational things? And I haven't actually heard that. So I don't know that this is really a place where we need to put a lot of energy. Judy, did you have something?
My hand keeps going like this because as you're talking about it, I'm remembering one of our meetings where there was a concern. I mean, we're talking about just the number of events or the number of people that might require certain kinds of parking modifications to the property that might then do something to limit the agricultural aspect. And so there was this kind of back and forth about, well, we don't want to be too specific, but we also don't want it to have no limitations at all. And I think we could never quite agree on what was that intermediate line of volume or numbers of people or numbers of cars or that kind of thing for different events that were even things like tours or farm dinners or like a strawberry festival. And I just remember there was kind of pushback about, well, we can't be too specific because there may be some, which I think is why it's lingered on the agenda for so long. It's like we never really did come down and say, no, we're not going to specifically say it has to be fewer than X number of cars, fewer than X number of people, X times of year. And I think that's how it just has stayed on the agenda because we could never really agree on that.
John, could I speak, John?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, and I also Judy, also the tendency for it to be like, oh, there's only 10 minutes left in the meeting and this agenda item. I think that's also a lot of it too. I think it's been on the agenda without receiving attention as many times as it has received attention. But go ahead, Peter.
Hey, John. Okay, when we put a lot of time into this 10 years ago, and basically the size, I forget, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's less than 10 acres of land. The agritourism can't be greater than 1 acre, except for the hayride and the train on rubber tires. And if it's over 20 acres, 10 or 20, I forget what it is, you can go up to 2 acres. And the agriculture has to be bigger than the agritourism, and the parking has to be adequate parking to support what you're doing. And we did it that way 10 years ago that it was vague, simple, and it been working and the whole thing. I think we should just focus on a few things that we were focusing on is that could work a little bit better for everybody, and also won't be asking so great that the county may go along with. And like Lauren asked, we need to have a reason why we're asking these, and the reason, like the 245 consecutive days, the reason why we wanted to increase the consecutive days, because the Christmas tree farm has gotten window is a little bigger, and say is the pumpkin as well. The non-consecutive days for the weekend people, and those were the reasons why. And if there's a few other things, other than that, we got it pretty much works. That what we've been doing for some time, and so if we could just not go too big, because we really have a good guideline that we made 10 years ago, and just may modify it a little bit in a few areas to improve, it would be good.
Right, right. And something that you've reiterated on occasion is that we want to, whatever we do, we don't want to give up the the opportunity.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to say is, a lot of times people get confused when it's the UPIC, the educational couriers, and stuff like that. They get confused that, oh, that's how's that work with the agritourism? It's not part of the agritourism. It's separate. It's by right. It's just like if you grow your own pumpkins and you sell them in the field, it's by right. If you want to bring in people over and show them what you're doing, it's by right. So that's all by right. That has nothing to do with agritourism. It's the bouncy house. I'll call it the entertainment, the recreation, whatever you want to call it. Those are the guidelines.
Right. Fair enough. Okay, well then maybe we're at a good point, unless there's some other committee members that want to weigh in. A pretty good point to hopefully get this off of our agenda, maybe after looking at a summary of what we've discussed, that hopefully Lauren can put together for us in a future meeting.
I don't know if we're going to see Lauren again. I mean, I haven't talked with her, but it wouldn't surprise me if you know, she is busy with other items. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I was going to say is who was on the original committee, and perhaps some of those members could get together and to review what we have right now and to kind of put together a proposal as to steps to move forward. Identify the issues that were you know, brought up by Audrey originally, perhaps engage Audrey as well, and then write up some next steps based on the input that the committee's already given. I know Lauren was the kind of the brain there, but it sounds like there were several of the committee members who were on this working group. Would they be able to put together next steps and to consolidate the comments that have been given by the committee members?
I think before we jump that far ahead, we should see if Lauren comes to next meeting, because she said she was going to do it, even though she was going to be in Santa Cruz by phone to help us through the guidelines, and she has all the notes. And then if she doesn't, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Well, and I could go even further than that. I know Summer had offered to maybe reach out, but I could reach out to her between this meeting and next to just see where she's at in terms of summarizing it, and if she wants to be done with this, then if she could just share that what she's captured from, because I think the last two meetings, Fred, we did actually kind of talk about this a bit, and we went back and forth, and I'm not sure how much, you know, how productive we really were, but I feel like Ryan, you know, was able to offer some ideas, and we kind of got to I think we got to a point where we could summarize a couple of modifications we might recommend to the county. And I don't know that we need to start the process over by like kind of reinitiating a new subcommittee, or
no, I'm saying just re-engaging the subcommittee that was there to go through and to consolidate the notes that we have into something that could be considered by the committee overall. And so I'm not, saying go back and restart over again. I'm just saying, let's just take what we have. And if somebody who's knowledgeable and has previously participated in this, somebody like Lauren, could take what we have and put it into some sort of an action document. I mean, right now we just have what comments on a piece of paper. And so what is the intention of the committee with regards to this, and what are our next steps?
Yeah.
Because this is the way it's been since I've been on this committee. I know I missed the last 2 meetings, but it doesn't look like anything's changed. And I've always had that question about what's the initiating action here and what's the intention?
Intention was to broaden the guidelines that we have set for in front of us.
Or to clarify them.
You want me to clarify it?
No, I said, or to clarify them.
Yeah, or to clarify. Okay.
Because based on what Judy said and what John had said about Audria's initial engagement of our committee, it sounded like there was questions about what is an ag tourism, and to get clarification on what we have.
Part of the reason why I understand it so well is because I was on the committee from day one. And so anyways.
May I ask who was on the subcommittee?
The one a year, 2 years ago, or the one 10 years ago?
2 years ago, this more recent, that's been looking, that we have these notes.
Okay, I was on it, Judith was on it, Lauren was on it, and let's see, I think Bill Cook was on it.
Yep.
And Judith, do you remember who else was on it?
I think you've just named it.
Okay,
Okay.
Yeah.
got it.
Oh, Ron.
And Audria, was
Ron
Audria?
Sturgeon. No, Ron Sturgeon was too.
He was too?
Yeah. Yeah, because I remember he and I exchanged some emails about it.
Okay.
Was Natalie Sarah?
Natalie was on it. Was Natalie on it? I don't remember.
She might have started, but then I think she had some issues and just couldn't make some of the meetings, so.
Yeah, she was on it. That's right. She was, and then she missed some meetings. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading some of her notes.
It looks like Audria had input as well. Was she there?
No, I think she
No.
just had input. She sent her notes.
Oh, okay.
Hmm,
Yeah.
Because I see that in the notes.
Yep.
got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, sorry, are there, I think,
Yeah.
did Judith have?
Judith, your hand is still up. Did you?
Oh, I didn't put it up. I didn't put it up. There, no. There we go.
Summer's hand is up.
Okay, so do either Chair Vars, if you would like to reach out to Lauren, or if you would like me to reach out to Lauren in the coming weeks and see, if she's, she may have already done some work from the last meeting, and I, definitely don't want anyone to have to duplicate any efforts if there had been some work done in summarizing kind of the conclusions of the group for the topics that we, have been dived into a little more. So would you like to reach out to Lauren on that, or would you like me to? I'm happy to, if you would like, and figure out kind of what's happened and what needs to happen next.
Yeah, either way, could you, why don't you reach out and CC me, and I'm happy to help take what she has and if necessary, and bring that to the committee, maybe even after having hopefully got it to a point where it's something close to like, hey, do we approve of this? Can we just present, does the committee feel that this represents our opinion, and then have a document that we can actually present to the Board of Supervisors for their consideration.
Okay, yes, I am happy to coordinate with both you and Lauren then in the coming weeks.
Thank you. That would be helpful because yeah, just it seems like it's been such a routine thing on the agenda that we really haven't been prepared to discuss it when it has come up. I'm going to mute
Okay.
myself
Oh, it's about time, Fred. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. All right. Well, I think we're doing pretty good here. That's our final agenda item, and we decided we were only halfway prepared to discuss it, though we did get some more clarity from Peter and about how much we do indeed know. And go ahead, Judy.
Well, I missed the last two meetings, and it sounded like you had some discussion that was a little bit more specific in both of those meetings.
We did actually, yeah. Yeah, we're just kind of hammering out the whole the as it's written right now, we can apply for 2 45-day windows for these larger agritourism events where you can have a bouncy house and you can have a snack bar, et cetera, et
True
cetera.
agritourism stuff.
Yeah, and we were discussing what we really were getting into the details around were, would we like to propose that the county broaden this to allow, say, 2 60-day windows, and then also maybe 10-day windows, so to give us a few different options, to allow for people who, because we were kind of like aware of the fact that people aren't going to come to a ag tourism event midweek down in Pescadero, but they might very well come to it on the weekend. So for someone who's more South Coast, could they, if they wanted to, could they have 10 agritourism events a year, but they're only a week long each, rather than being forced to conform to this established pattern. And I think we did, we kind of came up with some conclusions, although I'm not able to summarize them perfectly well in this moment.
Oh, good.
Maybe,
Okay.
yeah. And then the other thing, I think we were also talking about the farm dinner thing, because there's a limitation on the number of farm dinners currently. I think it's like 1 a month. And we were just like, well, what if we wanted to do 2 a weekend during the summer? Like, why can't the county say that that's okay? And so we were going to propose that would be opened up a little bit more. Yeah.
And John, could I add to that?
Please do.
Okay, and Judith, one of the reasons, like I was thinking about Blue House Farms, where they're only open to the public on the weekends, and they and correct me if I'm right or wrong, Ryan, but you pick berries in May, and therefore that way instead of having 2 consecutive 45 days, and then he used up his days. If they had non-consecutive days, some farmer like John could do, say, small little agritourism, says every weekend, says all the way to the end of October into his pumpkin season. And when I say a little, I'm not talking something big, blown up big, but he might want to just have a little train ride, or for somebody to come on, or something small, says for a come on to come in the farm on the weekends to help them. And so that's why we were thinking of non-consecutive days as well.
Okay. I mean, that sort of fits with the kinds of discussions that we went around and around and about in the subcommittee, actually.
It sure did, and we went round and right. Exactly. We just
Yep.
hinged on it some more, that's all. So.
And I think, I mean, my memory is that Lauren said one of the issues in terms of putting it to the Board of Supervisors was if we get too specific on the numbers, it gets more difficult for them to administer.
I
And
hear
so
you.
we kept coming to a stalemate about that. And so I don't know whether it's the wording needs to be more flexible without attaching a bunch of numbers to them. I'm not sure. Summer, is that part of the issue here? As we're moving forward, trying to close it, is that part of the issue?
I think Lauren is supposed to summarize this to try to help us. Unfortunately, she's not here.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of application of what gets proposed or
administering the
changed, but
guidelines.
yeah, but in terms, so in terms of kind of application of the guidelines, you're asking if there were specific numbers or quantities of events or timing or whatever, whether that's more difficult to administer?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the 245 days versus 10 2 days.
I guess just from the standpoint of trying to manage, like, I think it's a little easier to have 2 consecutive 45 days to know that, okay, this operator is operating from, January 1st to whatever, March, whatever, versus they're going to do, this weekend in June and this weekend in May and this weekend in September or whatever. It kind of gets a little more difficult, but and it may be, I don't know, it may be more difficult. I don't know if it's more difficult for an operator to, if they're proposing something that they're, the dates are kind of jumping around or there's multiple weekends, or to try to narrow that down as well, too far in advance. I don't know if that might present some challenge as well from an operator standpoint of trying to depict what that is, for a permit too early in advance of knowing it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's almost like life is messy. I mean, to try and say a year in advance, I'm going to do these events on these weekends for these days. It's like, I mean, I know Bill and I, in the end, it was always coming around to what we really want to do is enable farmers to supplement their income in a way that's also very positive for the agricultural community to the rest of the community in terms of learning and involvement and participation. Whether it was the size of the farm stand or the number of dinners or whatever.
And I think, I think part of the goal is to maybe minimize the kind of burden on operators in terms of how often they have to come and seek some sort of, approval or okay or agritourism permit. So ideally you want to, someone to have to apply for it maybe once for the year or whatever, and kind of and then not set for the year or set for the season, like they do now for the Christmas trees and the pumpkins. It's kind of this set season and they know every year, but they're not having to apply for, a permit for the pumpkin season and then one for something else they want to do that's maybe they hadn't thought of until a month before, and now they've got to come back and get a permit for it. So
a rave.
Yeah,
Do a rave. No, I mentioned that because I come from an enforcement background, and I know there's some issues within the community with people taking advantage of the agricultural tourism. And on one side, you want to make it as accessible for everybody as possible, but on this side, you also want to have something that's reasonable and enforceable. Because there are people that will take advantage of it. This committee and the county will get complaints about activities out there that kind of, I throw out rave, because there have been some operators that have had raves on their properties, much to the chagrin of the neighbors, 5 miles up the canyon. So,
Right.
But that is definitely the exception. And so I very much appreciate, what we're trying to accomplish here and Audria's questions. So, if we could get Lauren and see if we could move this to the next step, that would be excellent.
My question's for Summer. Who is the decision maker on whether these recommendations will pass or not? Is it?
it's actually, it would be through the community development director. And these guidelines, as far as I know, were never, they're guidelines, they're not codified regulations. So they don't have to go through some long, process to get formally approved and be codified into kind of, land use law. So they'll get revised and we'll take the comments from the Ag Advisory Committee. We'll work out a draft of an update and probably run it back, we'll bring it back to the committee. And then the community development director would sort of be the kind of final sign off to start implementing.
Okay, well, I feel like we're getting there. We're close, and so hopefully we can agendize something for next week that is more of doesn't have maybe 40 pages of notes, but is rather like 4 pages of something pretty succinct that we can all read before we come and be prepared to maybe approve or comment on briefly, and then we can get that to the, you called them the community director. There's some position.
The community development director
Community
and planning
development
staff.
director.
Staff will
Yeah.
review with the community development director.
Yeah.
Make the changes and bring a draft of the changed proposed amendment document back to the committee
Great.
to take a look at.
Okay. Well, everybody enjoy this respite of no rain for a while. I'm glad we got a little rain.
Have a happy holidays, a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Hanukkah, and everything else.
However you celebrate, wherever you celebrate. Yeah. Wishing everyone blessings.
Indeed.
Okay, thanks everyone for coming. It's 8:54 and I will adjourn this meeting. Don't believe I need a second on that. Thanks. I got a thumbs up from Fred.
Yeah, that's all
Thanks
you need.
everybody.
Thank you.
Have a happy holiday.
Yeah.
Happy holidays.
I guess.
Take care.